Y'all ready to be history?
Get started.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
To the Pro Audio Suite.
These guys are professional. They're motivated.
With Tech to the VO stars. George Whittam, founder of Source Elements. Robert Marshall, international audio engineer. Darren Robbo Robertson and Global Voice. Andrew Peters, thanks to Tribooth. Austrian audio, making passion heard. Source Elements. George the Tech Whittam. And Robbo and AP's international demos. To find out more about us, check theproaudiosuite.com.
Line up, ladies!
Here we go.
Welcome to another Pro Audio Suite. Don't forget, if you do want to buy a Tribooth, the code is TRIPAP200 to get $200 off your purchase. If you'd like to leave a comment, by the way, on your favourite platform, please do so. It's good for our analytics, and it might drive a bit more traffic, which is always handy. Now, something that may be out as we speak or may be about to be released is the new Nexus from Source Elements. You've definitely had a look at it, George. I think you've had a look at it, Robbo, and Robert knows all about it because it's his baby.
How much do you know, Robert? Let's be honest.
I'm clueless. Yeah.
No, that's me. That's my role.
I know it all, but really don't. I'm just like, yeah.
Can I just say before you dive into it, it's a very sexy beast. Seriously, it's very clever.
You've had a look around the whole thing, haven't you?
I have. I've sort of had to play with it, but I mean, Robert's going to explain it the best, so we should leave it to him to run through the list of features.
I like hearing what kind of mess other people make out of it.
Well, you know what's going to you know what inspires me the most, and I think is going to be the most useful for our listeners. I think is simple things like the dim operation, the fact that it actually just drops your mic level.
Drops the levels.
Yep, and all that sort of stuff.
A lot simpler than a Dugan mixer.
The gateway, from a studio point of view, from me looking at that gateway, man, everything's all in the box. You know, I've got video, I've got everything there. But, I mean, you should explain it all.
Yeah, so basically, Nexus started out, oh, God, how many years ago? 2007, I don't know, but I was like, wouldn't it be nice if you could route virtual audio interfaces in and out of Pro Tools? And it was just like, we made that, and it was kind of a hit. And what it was primarily used for was to interface the client side of a remote voiceover session, or just a remote client side. So think of it as Source Connect was the remote connection for voice talent into an engineer's setup, who then also has remote clients. And Nexus was used to empower things like Zoom and Hangouts, but we all know that all of those have their various issues. For instance, one of them is if you're broadcasting and you've got talkback going over Zoom, there's very different goals of the talkback versus the broadcast that you want to have your clients listen to. So the talkback can have echo cancellation on it, and actually that helps because many times your clients don't have headphones. But your broadcast, you don't want it to be impeded by the echo cancellation and things like this. So what Nexus is it still represents to me that sort of client-side connection, but now we're completing more of it. Instead of saying, oh, just like throw Nexus at Zoom or throw Nexus at whatever it is that, your clients are using Microsoft Teams, here's a gateway for it that does what you need as a professional audio and video person for collaborating with your clients, instead of trying to pound Zoom into a hole.
Here's how it was described 10 years ago. You sent an email out. Source Nexus is an audio application router. Record remote voiceover from Source Connect directly into Final Cut or Media Composer. Playback iTunes to Pro Tools, even patch Pro Tools to and from Nuendo all at the same time. Route any audio application in and out of Pro Tools, even if that application does not have any plugin support.
There you go.
That was December 2013.
So that's like a very broad
strokes
explanation, sort of like It's round and so it rolls, but it's like this is a wheel for a car. So yeah, the rolling part of it is, it pretty much is a router that was put in the DAW so that you could route external interfaces in and out and do things like that. And the primary thing that it got used a lot for was those client-side connections.
So how would it work for someone like me? What benefit would I get out of Nexus?
So the talent side, what do they see?
I think the same thing. So just like you've got Source Connect and you're running with studios and engineers, and it has like that rock solid queued up connection that's going to pick up every bit, even if the internet does its thing. As you know, voice talent are being forced to take up much more and more of the burden. And you have the situation where, hey, can I get playback? So one of the things that Nexus has is, it's now a suite, by the way. It's not just the plugin. So there's the original Nexus IO, which is sort of like just the raw plugin. You have to know what you want to do with it. You have to build your own template for it. Nexus Review is a Nexus plugin that now has several ins and outs going into it and out of it. So it brings your talkback over to the gateway, which is our web meeting room. It gets the gateway back into your connection so that you hear it in your headphones, and it plays your playback to the connection and everybody, and it does all of that without you having to even think about what the word mix minus is or if it even exists, because it's done all in one plugin. So what used to need 2-3 Nexus plugins and a talkback plugin is now Nexus Review.
Okay.
Straight. Just drop that plugin on your master fader. Your setup is complete.
So when you do playback, it actually mutes everything else, so you don't get, obviously.
It doesn't. It doesn't in this iteration, but there's going to be all kinds of stuff that starts to happen within the suite, within its sort of capabilities. And I think that right now, the first thing you would say is like it just makes playback easy. For your question specifically, Andrew, which is like, why would a voice talent want this?
Yeah.
It makes playback easy because really in that sense, you're just like the engineer at that point.
Yeah.
You're recording stuff and you're playing it back. Like that's kind of like what I do. And so this just makes that setup way less daunting because all you really have to do is, and also we're going to probably come out with that as a standalone app as well. So if you're using something like Twisted Wave, you can just route Twisted Wave into the Nexus Review app, and same thing. You don't have to be on a DAW. It doesn't have to be a plugin, but it takes it does your mix minus and your talkback and your like Twisted Wave. Actually, here's a question about Twisted Wave. Do you have the option to monitor live through it?
It does have a monitor mode that you can turn on, of course, with a little bit of latency, but it does have that capability.
Right. So you might want to do that. And funny enough, if it does create a latency with yourself, there's a handy mute button so you can mute it. And you don't have to listen to it, but at least your clients can hear you monitoring through Twisted Wave. So there's little individual situations that might come up.
What would be the benefit, though? Like if you don't have to monitor yourself in Twisted Wave, what would be the benefit of turning that on?
Well, the reason why is that you're either going to direct your microphone live into Nexus Review, but then if you want playback, you're going to route your DAW into Nexus Review. And if you call Twisted Wave a DAW, then you want to route Twisted Wave into it.
Okay, so you set the output in your Twisted Wave output setting to the Nexus Review plugin?
Input. Yep. Not
exactly. The input.
The input of, well, in this case, it would be the input of the application, not the plugin.
Gotcha.
Because in the DAW sense, the input is taken care of. It's like whatever channel you throw it on. The input is implicit.
Right.
And then that same ability for all you video editors out there and things like that. The review setup and integrating my talkback with a talkback button if I want, all of that is just like done. Whatever. I have to set up a template in Pro Tools, or I have to have a mixer, all the different things that people do to be able to
Passport VO.
Yes. Nicely slid in there. Maybe.
So just to get a little bit deeper. So I'm in Twisted Wave. I'm the actor. I've recorded myself. I hit stop. I hit play to hear playback. I want to hear the playback, and I want it to also send to Nexus. If I set the output of Twisted Wave to Nexus, will I myself on the local side hear the playback also, or will it be shunting the audio to...
You would hear the playback, and so there is a fader for you.
Oh, Nexus handles that for you.
Nexus has a fader with a mute on it that you could mute that if you wanted to.
So that solves that problem. Beautiful.
Right.
The question I've got, though, is it seems that we as voice over people are going to end up sitting in one room with microphones and screens and computers in there with us. So the booth is pretty well fast becoming redundant.
Well, it might be that radio style booth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it? Do you just have it in your booth? That's right. That would be my suggestion.
Yes, what I mean. But it's become like a radio, radio.
I think that's going to happen
studio.
anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of think that, I mean, for me, this thing's sort of ahead of the game because I can see that coming. I really can. More and more.
Yeah.
I even had 2 sessions in the last couple of weeks cancelled because the creative guys just jumped online with the voice and did it themselves. They didn't need an engineer.
Well,
so they just did it.
We do see a lot of that. You know, it's like the phone patch may have gone away, but the direct-to-client session and where it comes up, and it's really funny because clients don't really save time when they do this. They think they do, but they don't. So they say, hey, let's not book a studio to record the talent. Let's pay the talent the same amount of money and make them record it. And complain at them if it didn't work out the way we wanted, by the way. But so now we have the talent recording everything. And inevitably, no one keeps good notes. And even if someone does keep good notes, you don't know how well the talent is cutting up the files. And it's very easy, if you've ever been in a session, sometimes to get your take numbering off from what you're writing down and what's actually happening in a computer, especially if you as the talent, you're busy trying to do other things like read the script and not look at the computer screen on what file number Twisted Wave is on. And so inevitably, someone has to put Humpty Dumpty back together again after the talent has recorded everything.
Yes.
And that's going to take just as much time as just recording the session with an engineer online who can cut everything up and do it for you. And that way, the talent only reads what they need to. They're not reading a bunch of speculative takes because no one knows if A is going to edit back to take 65 or whatever. You can just hear it. You got it. Great. And it fits because we timed it out.
You've just touched exactly on the problem that came from one of these sessions the other day. And this was a well-known agency, a global agency, that they did one of these sessions where they just recorded it with whoever it was locally and they were on the phone. But the creative rings me and goes, I'm really happy with this, but we did some takes. I asked the talent to do this. But, of course, with no labels, no notes, no nothing, I've got to go through every single take and go to him, is it this one? Oh, no, that's not it. Oh, what about this? No, that's not it. No, it's more like this. Oh, hang on. Okay, well, is it this one? No, it's not that. It's like if I was doing the session in Pro Tools, it would be labeled. I'd have a page full of notes as well. This edits to this, blah, blah, blah. And it's done. But it took like half an hour to find one take for this guy, you know? It's like, it's ridiculous.
The penny wise pound
it is
foolish.
penny wise, pound foolish. But the other problem is that what happens is that they're all working off of flat bids, right? 1 hour for the talent. They know what their residuals are. They bid these things out, and it's really hard to get like these agencies to necessarily do just, hey, we want to be creative and throw paint on the wall and pay by the hour to throw paint on the wall. What instead they do, I don't know if you've seen that like it's that thing where the guy says like, hi, we'd like to do an advert and we want to research sound effects and do all this stuff and try 2 different music takes and this and that. So 1 hour.
Right.
Yeah.
And the person in the studio is like, I think it's going to take longer than that. And then the person at the agency is like, no, we know our stuff. We know exactly what we want. We're not indecisive at all. We only need 1 hour. And then you're like, okay, now you're stuck making a commercial in 1 hour that you know is going to take longer. So even though the agency basically saddles the talent with recording the takes, they never actually face the consequences of their actions because they've already, like, the bid happens, then they audition, and it's like they've already at that point with the bid taken out the voice record. We'll just give you takes.
Yeah. It's you get what you pay for, and if you don't pay, you don't get much. So yeah,
And you're going to pay later.
Well, that's the thing. It's pay now, pay later. It's sooner or later you're going to pay for it.
I really think this was that moment when the voiceover industry, they all decided that they were going to try to eat each other's lunch. And at some point it became like, my booth doesn't cost a thing. My setup and knowledge of my booth and what to do through blood and sweat and tears,
paying me.
figured out, and literal money, that is free too.
Right.
And all that stuff never should have been free. It should have been, okay, I'm whatever, $400 an hour, and you want to use my studio, even if it's $50 an hour.
Yeah.
There should be a rate attached. I totally agree. We as voice actors who wanted to be providing a service, and I can name names, but I don't need to, who were very early on in the home studio timeline, right? Like literally FedExing DAT tapes, right?
Yeah,
They didn't.
I
They were
think that
looking
they
at this.
wanted
They
to
wanted
be at
to be
home.
a service provider. They wanted to be ahead of the curve and create a business niche for themselves. In the meantime, they were creating a problem for the fact that home studios would eventually become the norm, and nobody was getting compensated for operating a studio and engineering a session.
It's like when you have something unique, you charge more for it. So if you're a voice talent, and because you're available at home, you are available like instantaneously. You don't need to have a limo drive you around LA.
Right.
It's like that's a perk, and it might be a perk for you, but it's also a perk for your clients. Like, but it became part of the add-in like a long time ago. This was in the early 2000s. Like this was in the days of ISDN that this happened.
It was literally when I got into the business.
Yeah.
I was just being told people need this help. And I didn't know anything about the business model. I didn't know jack squat about who got paid what, how, what you didn't get paid for. I just was there to solve problems, So I had no idea that this was going on till much later.
Yeah.
But here we are. Like talent put a lot of time, effort, money, emotion into building their setup and learning this, basically some aspect of the craft of audio engineering, essentially. Maybe not the whole thing, but there's like...
tell me this. Would there be a value, I know this is off topic, but would there be a value when a talent or an agent invoices that they, even if the bottom line is identical, that you literally add in a line that's engineering services? So it literally shows up and they see, we're paying for this. Would that be would there be some efficacy to this? It's kind of like restaurants starting to charge a service fee or a kitchen love fee or whatever. And it's like there's been a lot of blowback to this, because it doesn't. It's like some people like just raise your prices, and other people are like, I like the transparency. So it's kind of confusing.
I think that if you effectively want to raise your price, and the only way you're going to be able to raise your price is by showing your value. And so in that sense, you almost need to, because, to the point that it happens on the flip side. So not just there's three layers to it. It used to be that the talent went to the studio. And so there's two studios, and there was a lot of meat on the bone for a whole industry, right? There was an engineer in a studio in LA. There was an engineer in a studio in New York.
There was a tomahawk
voice
steak
talent in LA. Yeah, there was 5 creatives over in New York. It was all happening real time. And AT&T was like just digging into the pie too. And now it's like the first thing that happens is voice talent or the auditions come in and they say, must have ISDN or Source Connect essentially. And read between the lines. And what's happening over on the bid side is there's no money for a remote studio.
Yep.
Only talent with home studio need apply. And George, how many times have you seen talent that have done the Voice Tracks West or it's like, I know a place that knows what, pay out of pocket.
I tell people to do it all the time.
Voice Tracks West is...
I'm like, if you don't do these sessions that often, spending $10,000 on a soundproof booth is a massive waste of money.
Yeah, and Voice Tracks is like, got a tight operation. It's not, it's not like decked out in oak panels like all the big studios.
It's a working facility
but it's like, boom, it's like, here's a room, here's a setup. You need an engineer to set you up. We don't have staff to sit there and babysit you the whole time, but what are you going to do? That's all you need. And it's like, and I don't know what they charge, but I have a feeling it's
pretty
affordable
friendly.
enough
They
that talent...
They do what we call talent-friendly rates,
Right. And it's a great idea. So you get those auditions that are basically like, bring your own studio.
BYOS.
and 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 then the next level is like, you know what? We're not even going to hire an engineer to record it, like we just talked about. And it's like
right. It's a weird position. I've always felt weird being in the position of enabling, essentially, because I'm enabling the talent buyers to charge low rates for engineering or not budget for it, and I'm enabling the talent to meet that need at the same time.
There's the plus that, like, you have your talent that can go live where they want to, and there's many talent that would, if charging for their studio would be a deterrent to them having the lifestyle that they want. They want all their sessions to be in-house. The reason to give it away is not just because they're trying to get an edge over some other talent, but also because they're trying to direct their life the way they want it to be. And being called into a frickin' city every other day for an hour session and you got to drive 2 hours is crazy. And so it makes sense.
And let's face it, as a voice actor, you can't live the lifestyle that you would like to live and be in. Those days are mostly gone that you can live that lifestyle and have a nice home and have all this space and blah, 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 and live in the city, like live in Los Angeles or Toluca Lake. Like, that's unbelievably expensive.
Right. And you don't have to anymore anyways. So
Getting back to the rate thing, though, there is a way of doing it. And because on my invoices, I show studio and edit / and then, whatever the fee is, and it's usually 0. But you can actually put in there voiceover, blah, blah, blah. That rate goes in, studio edit, X dollars, and then you can give them a discount, which actually is equivalent to the studio rate. Mm-hmm. That way the client sees that there is a fee involved in that, but you've just done them a favor and not charged them for it.
I think that's
very clever.
smart. I will invoice people for a $0 item just so they know they're getting it.
Yeah.
The problem with like a flat rate,
or just write the real price down and say the discount that you're getting.
Yeah, I'll say this is
exactly.
a $100 thing. I'm throwing it in at $0, but you need to know that it's has a value attached.
Yeah.
Well, everything we do has a value attached because it's our time, right?
Yeah, but it needs to be literally spelled out for them on black and white, I think.
Agreed.
But the stupid thing is, I was talking to, in fact, Robbo and I were talking yesterday about equipment and stuff in the studio. Admittedly,
that's the stupid thing?
Well, it's a stupid thing in my case because it's ridiculous. I mean, I don't need any of this stuff really. But I was sitting here the other day, like adding up how much the dollar value of the stuff I've got in here in preamps, compressors, and microphones is it's just completely insane.
It's ridiculous.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
fun though.
Like it is fun, and it's like okay, it is people putting wings on their back of their Honda Civic.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Robert.
I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like we are kind of doing some of that.
Honda even does that. You can
know?
buy a Civic with 3 exhaust type tips coming out the back.
Yeah,
now.
exactly. Yeah, get yourself a Type R. Boom, look out.
Yeah.
But
sometimes we're just like, ooh, that thing's going to make us faster and improve my 0 to 60 time, that Neve preamp or whatever. And I think that we get caught up. I mean, God knows I've spent a lot of money on audio gear.
Oh, you have. You're worse than me, actually.
I have, yeah.
I think you.
I need like the
worse.
nose spray that like breaks the addiction.
Yeah,
whatever.
But Robert's business model is a different one. He's serving. His service is his studio and his skill with his tools. So I feel like a service provider that's providing that type of a studio service, there's an expectation of a certain investment in that equipment and knowledge,
and keeping it up to date and keeping it serviced and keeping.
It's funny though, because I did send a file off to one of the audio production guys in one of the radio networks here because he was looking at buying Austrian audio microphones for their studios, which he did.
You salesman, you.
But he said, "Oh, can you send me something? You got a sample of the 818?" And I went, "Yeah, sure." So I sent him just a cold read 818 through the Neve. And he just come back going, I said, "What do you think?" He goes, "Oh my God, I'm buying one."
Nice.
Because it does
the
sound
voice
good.
that sells.
It's so funny. The subtle stuff is really there, but it's great when either someone is completely, doing the same drugs that you're doing, or actually is truly hearing the same thing that you're hearing. There is this like, wow, that really is better. And at the same time, there's, someone walks in who doesn't understand much about audio and goes like, what's the difference? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, of
You
course.
see
A
me,
or B,
you get
the
me.
same.
You really get me. You really see me.
Well, it was really funny. It's like a guy that both Robbo and I know is also an audio guy. This is years and years and years ago. He got a voice track sent. It was a cold read from a studio in Melbourne. And he called me up and he said, do you know what microphones or what microphone they use down at the studio? And I said, no, I don't actually. He said, man, you've got to find out. It sounds unbelievable. So I went down there and I was in there doing a job. And before I got in there, I said, oh, what mics are you using, by the way? And he goes, oh, what was the session? I told him. It's like, oh, yeah. We've just bought a new U47, the Telefunken U47. When they first reissued the thing, I'm like, okay, so I think they were selling for close to 20,000 Australian dollars at the time. So 14,000 US, I'm guessing. It sounded very nice.
He would want to.
I didn't know they reissued that mic.
Yeah, the Telefunken U47.
Yeah, I never knew there was a reissue of that mic.
Yeah. I think
that thing's been like homages to.
No, I know,
all
but I mean,
kinds
it's
of,
literally in Neumann, literally, like they did just the U67 like 5
Well,
years ago.
it's Telefunken, but Telefunken is not the Telefunken that Telefunken was, right?
correct, yeah.
It's like
yeah.
Telefunken's like some company in Connecticut. Telefunken's really a European.
Funky Funkin'.
It was kind of weird, though, because a lot of the Neumanns were rebadged for America. So, like Frank Sinatra's U47 was actually badged, I think, as a Telefunken.
Right, because it's really, so they were really U47s, they were really Neumanns,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then they were rebadged as Telefunken. And then the same thing happens with the AKG C12. Because Telefunken was a importing company. They would like commission things to be made, or they would just like say, hey, I'll buy a bunch of those.
And there were tons of companies doing that, particularly in America, where they rebadged, microphones under different brands that were made, primarily by AKG or Neumann.
It's kind of like rebadging Chinese stuff.
Yeah.
In a way, it happens. It's like happening again.
Yeah.
You see the same product, and it's like, oh, they just put a different name on it and called it their amplifier.
So you're gonna white label Nexus and sell it off under different brands?
There's all kinds of discussions and things that pop up, and then sometimes just like fizzle out. But one thing for sure, I think, is that at least on some version of the Gateway, like one of the talked about features is to customize it so you can make it, like Andrew's Shop of Horror.
Well, one thing I wanted to touch on, and something that's not in the demo though, but something you were showing me after we finished recording a couple of weeks ago, is the router. Can you tell us about that? Because that's a game changer.
Right. It's not going to release on the first. It might actually. I don't know. But right now it's a little bit behind. It would be one of those things that certainly would take. It would be one of the things that takes longer to get out. But it's pretty much done, and it's just a desktop router, so you can set up a lot of this stuff or the rest of the stuff that you want to customize on your desktop routing. For example, if you wanted just to have something that routed, like one of the things that happens with Pro Tools in particular is once you close your session, you lose all your routing. So if you're not putting all your work into one session or working on one thing, and you have to open up different files while you have a group of people online and connected, when you close Pro Tools, you lose communication and possibly even different parts of those connections, depending on what platforms they're on. They might lose their connections too, because some of those connections go through you. So router gives you the opportunity to be able to set up sort of like a desktop route. Similar in a way, George, to what a lot of people that you have do with the Apollo mixer, right?
Yeah, I was going to mention that, right, exactly. But being on a you're now hardware agnostic. You can be on anything.
Because the killer for that, for me, is exactly what you're saying, is that whole thing of like, you're halfway through a session and the creative goes, hey, last time we did this, we did blah, blah. Can you go to the old Pro Tools session? And you got to do that whole embarrassing, listen, I can do that, but you're going to lose me for a second here, guys. Okay, I'll be back in a minute. And you hear the, So away you go and you do it.
That whole thing changed the way I work. I have Pro Tools sessions with hundreds and possibly, I don't know, thousands of spots. Whole years of campaigns, just boom, one after the other.
Do you do them all on
because
one
of that whole
timeline?
Thing of like, one big ass timeline. Yeah, absolutely.
Really? They're not just clips in the clip viewer?
No, it's like basically what Pro Tools lacks is any sort of like. Have you ever worked in Media Composer?
A little bit.
Okay, so Media
called a
Composer,
bin.
you can have sessions. No, well, you have a bin, yeah. Pro Tools users have been wanting folders within their bin for the last 20 years, and they still have yet to get them. Different issue. But even more so, the edit and the mixer in Pro Tools are joined at the hip. But there's many aspects of your mixer that are not part of your edit. They're just part of your studio. So
It's sort of like there's a utility mixer.
This is a utility. This is your external. What used to be in a lot of early setups were like people that would have like a Mackie mixer off to the side, and then they'd have Pro Tools. And what was going in and out of the Mackie mixer was like microphones and headphone feeds and connection to the tape deck probably back then, and so they were like the mixer still had routing capability, and some of that's daunting. And really, what you need is just like a couple straight ahead patches and maybe a volume control. And that's really what Nexus Router lets you do. It has an advanced mode where you can just sort of like draw whatever you want from A to B. And then that way you can even have different setups that you can load and save and close and open up a different setup. You can make one massive setup.
I'm looking forward to it because I'm looking forward to being more hardware agnostic and less attached to something like the Apollo, in general. And kind of endorsing that kind of mentality of being a little bit less attached to that system. So this will be something that'll be nice to set up for more people who do want that extra level of sophistication,
Absolutely, yeah. It'll make it like if they have little special things that they need to do, even something like a talkback mic when they're outside, or playback from some other device if they want to plug their phone in or have some other app.
Let me ask you this. This is definitely going down, a rat hole in terms of features, but can you imagine that ever being on a touchscreen interface like an iPad or having a controller
I could definitely imagine, like we've already got other levels of control that we're planning on, which are, I think, pretty exciting.
You guys were talking earlier about, the things are moving towards the actor having to have really a full production suite in their booth, right?
Yeah.
It sucks, though. I mean, people don't want that.
The day,
Some do.
day that someone asks an actor to not only record for them, but can you please play back picture while you record?
It happens.
When that happens, then it's like you're really throwing a lot at the actor.
Cipriano. I mean, he does that stuff when he has to.
But some people can do that. It's like it wouldn't be that hard.
I mean, he paid me to set up Pro Tools to do it.
Right.
So it would be lovely for someone who really still wants to have a feeling of I have a mic, I have a headphone, I have my script, but not having to have keyboard, monitor, mouse, that whole rig in there too.
And just
have a somewhat innocuous iPad, or even if you're reading off the iPad, you can just do the 4-finger swipe and switch over to the mixer.
Yeah, the hardest thing becomes, and there's been like, I still think the iPad's a tough environment. There's been a lot of actors have been like, why? When can I just do this all on the iPad?
Yeah, no, there's a bit of a stay in your lane. The iPad has a lane to stay in. Like to me, it still has no place in a pro audio production workflow except as a controller or a script reader.
Yeah, it works well as a controller. Like I've got my V Control.
Yeah, a controller and a script reader. Like that's what it's for to me. It's not a pro audio. Despite the power of the thing, the hardware, the fact that it's got Thunderbolt now in the Pro model, iPad Pro, it's still just not the tool for the job. So use it what it's for, and that's what it's good for. So I would endorse having that in there just to control the Nexus monitoring and the other stuff.
Do a lot of talent really, really avoid and not want?
Some really do avoid it as long as they can. They really despise doing that.
I'm one.
Yeah. It's because of the distraction, because you're now, this is the right brain, left brain, actor, engineer conundrum. You can't do both at the same time. I don't care who the hell you are. You can't do them both equally well. One is always suffering at the hands of the other. So the actor that really...
So, but what does an actor need in the booth truly? Like they need to be able to record takes, and they need to be able to play back takes.
Some people, like, I'll call you out, Bo Weaver. I've known you so long. He hits record, he walks into the booth, he records all of his sessions, he walks out of the booth, and he sits down and he edits all the sessions. Like, done. There's no... That's his workflow. Now, how often is he directed? Very rarely.
I was going to say,
it's record and send. But that's what he likes. He likes to have the two separate church and state,
Well, I'm exactly the same. I have the same workflow as Bo because a lot of my stuff is not directed. So I do exactly the same thing. I go in there, record, come back, and come out of here and edit and send.
Yeah.
But how many times do you go back and forth?
I save each file separately. So if I'm doing like four 30-second spots for somebody, then I'll record a couple of takes or 2 or 3 takes.
How do you know you're in time? Are you timing yourself?
I do a timer first. I would sit there and I'll time one with the stopwatch, first read, so I know ballpark where I'm at. By the time you deep breath, you lose a couple of seconds. So, if I'm doing like one that's got to be 27 seconds and I come in at 27, then I know I've got 2 seconds up my sleeve so I can take more time with it. And once you've been doing this for, long
that's the thing. You guys have like atomic clocks built in.
It is like
I can't
that,
tell you how many times I've had a talent and I'm like, can you take half a second off that? And they take half a second off that. It's like, wow.
And then
it's funny.
Bo had an iPad 1 for years. He may still have it, just to run the timer, period. He's like, it's a great timer. It doesn't make a click.
I have,
just tap on the screen.
I have an iPad 1 that I use for my 8 faders of Pro Tools. So there's some minimal amount of control that's necessary. They at least need a door handle. Probably do they want a mic mute?
Yeah, I'm sure they would. Most people would like to have that, I would think.
Yeah.
It's pretty embarrassing.
Particularly when you've got a horrible client down the line, and mic mute's very handy.
Horrible client or bad cheese.
Yeah.
How do you find the foot switches for that?
I reckon a foot switch would be great.
You need one of those, AP. You need a foot switch.
Yes, I need a foot switch. A foot switch is great. I love it. The trouble is I probably tread on it by accident and halfway
the
through
Whirlwind
a take or
PPD or whatever they have a foot switch on-off switch.
The ones that don't break phantom power so that they don't pop, they just sort of short out.
And it's also like I wouldn't want. The idea is fantastic. I think it's fun, but I hate too much stuff between the microphone and the preamp.
Yeah. Well,
there's that one more thing that can go wobbly on you.
Not to go completely off base here again, but I was talking earlier about what I saw at Podcast Movement, and I saw the Boss answer to the Rodecaster Pro.
And because Roland's had stuff
and Roland too. Boss is like their musician wing of Roland, or like the guitar pedal.
I don't know about that,
Roland, right? So they had
Boss is the guitar wing, and Roland is the keyboard wing. But they've crossed areas. Like mainly, Roland has made guitar synths, and the other view is that Roland is the high end, and then Boss is the middle.
Right. So I'm looking at their things and going, okay, here's another, Rodecaster. What's on the back? A foot pedals plug. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. What can you do with that? And he's like, whatever you want.
For the gamers.
You can do anything you want. I was like, well, I can see that being cool because the mixer's outside on your desk and you run a foot pedal in your booth and now you have a way to cut your mic, Or it could be a way to hit record and then punch a marker, when you click it again. There's a lot you could do with that. And
So it sends. So whatever you want, the foot pedal can send like USB messages.
As far as I can tell, I don't know how flexible it is, but it's pretty flexible. There's also Air Tools or Air Turn. I think that's called Air Turn. And now other companies are getting into it where you can get Bluetooth pedals that go in your booth, to control certain functions. So there's more you can do with foot pedals, which is kind of neat. But if I'm not wearing headphones and I don't know my mic is truly off, I would never trust anything wireless. I was like...
So what about the preamp? I mean, the preamp should be in the booth or not? Because, I mean, even if you wanted to be really theoretical about it, your best signal would be by running the shortest mic line and getting it up to the line preamp
right
line level.
If you're running
then sending it
20-foot runs,
like
that's
10 feet.
different.
Yeah,
Never different. It's negligible.
But having the preamp in the booth to be able to set it is a different thing.
Right.
Isn't that necessary?
Yes and no. I mean, some people do. I'd say most people that have a booth that don't have the equipment in the booth don't have the preamp in the booth, but it's less convenient.
And so they're just recording conservatively and going like, I'll just hit -12.
Mm-hmm.
I got plenty of bits. So,
I put plenty of Avalon 737s in booth, and I just told people, like, this thing's a radiator, so it's going to get nice and toasty in here. If you really need to have this in here, I get it, but be my last choice to put in the booth.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. The more gear I was going to say about that, exactly that. You're most people's home studio booths are quite small, and you start piling gear in there, it's going to be like a furnace.
Yeah, gets hot in there quick. So the less the better. Even modern computer monitors are pretty low power, but they still make heat. They still radiate heat. Everything makes heat. So the less in there, the better. Yeah, it's going to be interesting when the Passport VO comes out, how people choose to use it, whether they're going to have it in booth or outside of the booth. You can go either place, and the thing you're going to miss out on it not being in booth is that mic switch, mic mute. That's why I think the majority are going to use it in the booth. So what we'll be testing is seeing
so too. Yeah.
how far we can run it on USB to the computer. So we'll be doing some testing around that whole workflow as well.
Yeah, I can see the value in having the Passport VO in the booth for sure. Maybe you're doing a Zoom session or whatever, you can use that second interface to run either your phone or iPad or whatever, that you can run the Zoom session.
That's what I could see it being really useful, having the iPad in the booth for phone patch, Zoom / blah, blah, blah communications.
Absolutely.
And having that run into it, and just, that would be a really, really easy way to facilitate those sessions. Boy.
Well, in a way, you can have it. Sorry, you can cut all that out.
We're really off topic now.
This was about Nexus, and I don't know where the hell we've gone.
Oh man, we've gone all over the place. Let me tell you,
this is
tangential.
I'm just waiting to see the Mad Hatter pop out from behind the door somewhere.
I know. The editing nightmare that is the Pro Audio Suite.
Yeah, wrap this one up.
I'll bring it together. What comes out first? The Passport or Nexus?
Nexus.
Probably right.
Well, we'll see, because these are both.
But we don't know.
Both don't knows. Neither of them want to divulge a release date until it's certain, because people don't. We've all learned that produced product to under promise, over deliver is really the best policy.
You can't give a product a C-section.
Right.
What we can promise about the Passport, though, is that when it does come out, it's going to be killer.
It's going to be killer. We're going to make sure of it, because by the time anybody receives one in the mailbox, we have already hammered on it and proven without a shadow of a doubt that it will do what we said it's going to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When you get one, it's going to be fully tested and vetted before that. So,
yeah.
I'm excited, because I think it's you see all these USB interfaces coming out constantly, and no one has one that does these
They're
things.
all playing out of a different playbook. Like, I got into a whole conversation on Facebook about this. One person's POV is clearly the future is firmware, software, everything, And I said, I don't think it's that clear. I said, because we're developing the exact opposite. And his response was, I think that's not a good idea. And my response was, I think it's a very good idea, because look at all the products that have come and gone, and what products you can still plug into your Mac or your PC that still work 15 years later. And the MicPort Pro first gen is one of those products. You just plug it in and it works. So that's the philosophy. We're just carrying that forward.
My old trusty 002 rack sitting here right next to me. How old is that now? Jesus, 15 years? Have to be something like that. Still keeps going.
A 002, not even an 03. An
002 rack. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. I have some 001s in my garage.
No, I don't need the 001.
What are they doing in the garage?
Yes, exactly. Why aren't you
things
using them,
are-
Robert?
Yeah,
For someone
doors
like you?
He's using his ramps to hold up his Porsche 920.
Yeah, it's 944. Yeah, that's right.
Well, that was fun. Is it over?
The Pro Audio Suite with thanks to TriBooth and Austrian Audio. Recorded using Source Connect. Edited by Andrew Peters and mixed by Robbo. Got your own audio issues? Just ask Robbo.com. With tech support from George the Tech Whittam. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and join in the conversation on our Facebook group. To leave a comment, suggest a topic, or just say g'day, drop us a note at our website, theproaudiosuite.com.